Perfect. So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Social Housing Roundtable. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Elaine. I'm the head of partnerships here, and I work with Matt to bring you this free to attend webinar every Tuesday at 11 o'clock. I hope you're all very well and enjoying kind of middle of January, I believe it is now. Let's call it that. It's gone really quick already. Before we get started and before I introduce Graham to the roundtable today, we have to thank all of you lot for coming and joining the conversation. Thank you very much. We also need to thank our sponsors, CMSG and Alertical, who help us keep this free to attend and help people to kind of access kind of sector insights, best practice, discussion and debate, because that's what we're all about. So today I'm joined by Graham, not Ben, from CMSG. He'll do his own introductions, but we're going to talk about ASB. And whilst it says the truth behind the data, I think we're really here to kind of perhaps debunk, what ASB is all about, what it looks like, and how we should really go about kind of trying to address it, sort it out, but also then prevent it. As always, you can add comments in the chat, you can put your hands up. There is no question too small, too silly. There is no right or wrong answers either, I don't think. I think this is all about debate, discussion, respectful disagreement. And that's what we pride ourselves on here at the round table. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Graham, who is already sharing his screen. And Graham, over to you.
Thank you very much, Elaine. Hello, everybody. My name is Graham Wellard. If any of you have met me before, I've probably been very intensely talking about config. But for everybody else, I'm actually relatively new to the housing sector, which actually, if I move to the next slide, for who I am. I'm from Case Management Solutions Group, and I joined CMSG about 2 years ago from the civil service. So I don't have the full background that everybody else here does, or perhaps might have. In some ways, this can be really useful because outsider coming in and asking, questions that seem obvious, makes you maybe reconsider where you're coming from. But whilst I don't have a huge amount of experience in housing, I've got a lot of experience in being a massive data nerd. So I do enjoy the process of kind of like gathering information, interrogating information, and the lessons learning part of it. I will not apologize for that. I think really this is one of the few occasions in my life that it'll be an asset. So I'm going to be enjoying that. My role at CMSG is as an onboarding manager. And now this isn't a sales pitch, but I do work for the company and it is relevant. We have a case management system. It's really cool. It's really configurable. It's kind of seated in community safety. It started in ASB. And because it can be configured in a bunch of different ways, my job is, as each organization comes on and starts using our product, it's basically taking the wants and needs of an organization and converting that through and actually representing that in the workflows and the various tools and processes of the products that we have. And it's that which is what I'm going to be calling on and going to kind of like be making relevant, particularly because my experience in that also includes things like getting data back out again from all of that work that we've done. And kind of I've had a lot of discussions with loads of different customers about what they need their management systems to do and what data they need to report on. Which I think is, well, hopefully going to be really relevant. So that's where I'm coming from. There is a very real chance that I may have some fundamental misunderstandings of ASB that I've still not come across yet. And so if you do correct any of those in this session, I can only say thank you very much. But I've got a decentish understanding at this point, I should hope. So me aside, let's start talking ASB, kind of the truth behind the data. That's the tagline for this, and that's our starting point. And I started doing some research. Again, I'm not as I've not spent as long in the sector, so I'm like, right, okay, I'll get myself up to speed with all of the the data that is available on ASB. And it turns out not very much data is actually hugely available. I've genuinely really struggled to get decent. Maybe that's a little bit unfair. Like where there is data, some of it is quite good, but it's definitely not well, as you'll see here, we've got the crime survey for England and Wales. Obviously, that's that's people's perception of crime, and it's a normally good thumb on the pulse of how people are feeling, and it gives you a good indication as to like the ups and downs. And that seems to suggest that ASB is at a fairly level rate in the last couple of years. Obviously, the pandemic has caused all sorts of spikes to these sorts of things, but following that, yeah. But it mostly the other bits of information mostly seems to come from police data. And if there's one thing I've learned, given that it's literally my job to set up all of these systems for customers that aren't the police aren't necessarily the people who are handling the bulk of ASB cases. I also, as a part of this, came across the new I came across like yeah. So critically, the fact sheet for the crime and policing bill, which does call out the fact that it's not unknown that the government doesn't have this centralized data. They're very aware that they don't have it. I've not had a chance to really dig into the Crime and Policing Act. But I do know that there are plans to gather better information, and that is one of the things that I do want to have a bit of a chat about amongst our various topics today. So, on the whole, our base of information to actually work from nationally, not great. I did find a couple of websites where some councils have uploaded a lot of in-depth information, and it's very cool. Of course, that in some cases it's just the councils, not the housing associations that work inside those councils areas. So even that isn't necessarily a complete picture of all of the information. So bringing together all of this data is absolutely going to be a challenge. Records do exist, like I've said. My job is I contribute to the problem of creating all of these myriad records. But there are so yeah, I do this kind of like setting up, like we sort out what wants to come in, what comes to what wants to come out. Our product has a reporting tool. Power BI is ubiquitous across loads of organizations and is a very cool tool. So I'm very aware of the fact that there is a desire to know what's going on in ASB in a very real sense for helping manage ASB. It's being gathered, it's being used, but it seems to be each organization sees to itself. That's not a bad thing. They absolutely should be, but there's currently like I've labored on for the last few minutes, no real joined up approach. And so I really want to discuss what we're all doing because I'm a massive data nerd and I think it's going to be fascinating. In my job and in looking into this, we are absolutely going to be running into some problems with unifying data because you can't really it's hard to compare like for like if we don't have like for like. As a part of my role in setting up the really configurable system that we've got, perhaps in some cases too configurable. It's absolutely not. No, I've struggled on occasion to find, or I've been asked for, oh, well, what does everybody else use to categorize ASB? And the answer is, well, that'd be really cool if we knew. Things that I've been able to find, I found a document that I refer to still that was published in 2004 that gives us 13 broad categories and a load of subcategories about, defining ASB into some categories. Some of which isn't actually that relevant because some of those categories are just crimes and kind of have elevated beyond ASB at that point as well. Now, for a reporting model, we should absolutely include that because you don't want to have a system where you can only record ASB if you've got a system where you're taking data in, doing some work on it, and then it gets escalated up to the point that you've uncovered a crime. We need to be able to record that. But even so, it's part of this muddying of the waters. Likewise, the ways that we talk about classifying ASB, the categorization, was it noise nuisance, was it cars revving their engines, that sort of thing, but also the urgency and risk associated with it is another element that is vitally important where when I say there's no consistency in that is not really true. Every organization is broadly consistent, but they describe it differently. So I would say every single organization that I've ever worked with or helped set up has got 2 to 3 urgency categories because there's high risk, you need to deal with this right now. And then they may or may not split the not high risk cases into 2 bands or keep it as 1 band. And at no point has that ever been low risk. This is my note here: the split between high and standard, or high, medium, and standard. And I do forget which one's which when it comes to medium or standard. Which one is lower, medium or standard? And I appreciate that nobody wants to say something is low risk. But at the and we one of the things I'll be hopefully we can be discussing is maybe the low risk isn't actually ASB at all, but maybe it's still being handled by your organization. So, like noise nuisance, for example. Noise nuisance can be noise nuisance. It can be ASB. Some noise nuisance is just people living next to each other and not getting on and reporting it. And some noise nuisance is nuisance. And the split on that, I mean, I'm sure that that if there haven't been already, there will be like hours upon hours of content that we could generate talking about that. But depending on each individual's organization's cut-off point at which they're going to be treating it as noise nuisance or not, that can be affecting their data. Likewise, a lot of the organizations, although they might split the difference on noise nuisance or ASB noise nuisance, the same teams will be handling it. In some cases, it's housing officers that are handling everything. In some cases, there's an ASB team. In some cases, there's like a community safety and an ASB team. Like, depending on the size of the organization, how much resource you've got, the same people can be handling things that broadly require the same sorts of steps. The steps to handling noise nuisance and the initial steps of ASB noise nuisance are going to look quite similar. There's an amount of communicating with the other person, trying to get them to resolve things because, like, I presume nobody goes straight from, oh, we've received a noise complaint, excellent, we'll begin the eviction proceedings. Like, nobody escalates like that. And then the final one, which is my own personal, it's gripe is unfair, but it is my own personal interest, if I guess is a better way to put that. And that's outcome recording. Recording closed cases is excellent. You can see what you're closing, you see what you're not. Recording whether that case was resolved or unresolved is great. Like, knowing, did this kind of just fall off the radar or not? And again, this is not an advert. Our system gives us the ability to record a lot more in depth to that. Some of our customers use it to differing amounts, and recording the outcomes and what was effective in securing that outcome is an area that I'm very interested from a data analysis point of view, and we will come back to that. So that's the setup, if you will. That's kind of like where we are. I've talked about how much knowledge I don't have, which is great. I do have a whole load of questions that I'm really hoping some folks here can answer, because I think the answers to these are going to be genuinely fascinating and properly, gonna give us some real thoughts. And
Graham,
so, yeah,
just before we dig into that, we've had a couple of comments, and I think they're really important. Actually, I know you're going to come on to them,
yeah.
but I think just in terms of that scene setting, you've done a great job there of kind of explaining that actually how much we can trust the data that it sits behind kind of what's reported on, by individual landlords, but also outside of that. And that's not to say landlords are doing it wrong. It's just to say, with all this kind of inconsistency, I guess, with how we define ASB, it's really difficult then to kind of compare. And I think you've got some real supporters within the chat that I wanted to read out. So, the statistics we don't have, that we do have, don't reflect the reality. We need a better multi-agency approach, which I know that we've absolutely advocated for within the past. Tenants need more information so they can lobby for change, and there's lots of people in agreement with that. Communication between agencies is at times it delays. Delayed, which is slowing ASB cases and kind of what you can do with them. And Simon has put in the chat, and this is really important, it's something we spoke about yesterday, Graham. There are obviously people behind the statistics which don't necessarily show the human impact of kind of ASB. And Tim's come in and said, with GDPR and the proposed voluntary digital ID scheme, have any influence on what data you can store? Data wise, we need to think about that, obviously, because we are taking kind of personal data. I'm sure you'll come on to some of this and your views on that as well, Graham, but I just wanted to kind of pick those pieces up within the chat for us right now. Is there anything you want to say at this point before we go into questions on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I can comment on some of this and then keep it going. So first of all, I think the number one thing that we absolutely should be keeping in mind at all times is exactly what Simon said, and that is that every single data point in these data sets that we assemble represents one or more people's lives. It represents homes, it represents parts of a community, and obviously, yeah, I don't need to tell everybody else here that because I'm sure that everybody else here, knows and understands it. But it is worth remembering and like going, rounding things up and saying, oh, we've hit up to 80% at this point, and like this is these things of sometimes good statistics can still have problems in them because the goal should always be that we solve absolutely everything, even if we could never really achieve that goal. To have that as our aspiration, yeah, no, I agree. And that constant drive, that constant desire for continuous improvement, yeah, no, we should keep that underpinning everything that we do. And I 100% agree with that. Like,
Thanks,
yeah,
Graham. Right,
absolutely,
crack on with your questions then, and we'll get some more debate
absolutely.
going.
I will pick back up on that GDPR thing as well because
Okay, yeah.
I can do that now. I can do that later.
Yeah, yeah, do that now.
But
Absolutely.
broadly speaking, when it comes to it, um, I don't. So voluntary digital ID scheme shouldn't actually affect things too much, because most of the organizations that are going to need to keep ASB data will have a reason or need to process that data that's articulable. And the Data Protection Act is actually quite, if you're doing it properly, the Data Protection Act is very good at letting you do your job properly. You just have to have considered everything, and you shouldn't be keeping data beyond what you need. So long as you can articulate why you need that data, you can show that you're protecting that data and only using what you need from all of the data that you're gathering. The GDPR shouldn't be a barrier to us effectively being able to work with the information that we gather. There's some really good best practices that we should be following in that. So, for example, where we do start to generate data sets, we definitely want to be leaving the individual data out of it at that point. We should be anonymizing where appropriate. Obviously, some of those data sets will include protected characteristics because we're going to want to know, what percentage of people with protected characteristics are being affected, but you can then take the person away from it. Basically, there's a bunch of different ways that you shouldn't struggle to be compliant with GDPR and still do your job and gather data, just so long as you've taken a few moments to actually consider your position, and so long as you're being reasonable. And the desire to reduce ASB is quite a reasonable reason to be doing things. So I
Great.
don't see GDPR being any sort of impediment.
Brilliant. Thanks, Graham. We'll let you carry
Um,
on.
yeah, thank you. No, I love talking about GDPR because of who I am as a person. Right. So yeah, what truth can we learn, and what can we do to make data more useful? That's kind of after me setting down all of these woes as to why we can't use the data. And the questions that I have are basically, what can we do with the data that we have? So presumably we will be moving towards there will be some guidelines coming up at some point in the future where we might start to have some sort of standardized reporting. But with the data that we currently have, I'm really curious to see what organizations do with it, because I think that there's a wealth of information internally that you can be using. And I really hope that the answer is yes, Graham, we're doing all of that. Actually, we do know how to do our jobs, and that'd be fantastic, but I want to talk about it. So for example, like when do you review your case data? You've got your caseworkers, they're generating all of this case data, they're working, and like how often is that reviewed? What do you guys do with that data? What's your process on that? I'm genuinely curious, like to what extent, like how often do you have these moments? Do you like, what conclusions are you able to draw from the way that you currently gather data? And if you aren't somebody that works with that data, we can also discuss ways that we can gather that information. Part of my job is figuring out how to set up a system so that you can record nuances of things and be able to show when certain things are done. So, what things do we want to know to make these decisions? If you are in an organization, if you are somebody that's worked that works with this, like have you used case data to have an impact on your resource allocation? Everybody knows that money is tight everywhere in anything that's delivering anything resembling some sort of a service. And so how do you prioritize it? And does your case data feed into that? If it doesn't, maybe that's something, could it be? And if it isn't, is it because the data is no good, or is it just because it's not, that not fed in? Again, these are things I really want to find out about because I'm a massive nerd. And again, forwards and backwards on the case data as well. So you've got a wealth of information. is this just pushed forwards? Do you review the data and then push it forwards? Or when you come to decision points, do you go and find that data and pull it back out again to and how hard or easy do you find that? Is your current system and setup able to handle what you're looking for? These sorts of things. And yeah, and the thing that I'm really interested in, and this kind of comes back to this case outcomes part, which I've mentioned. I'm really big on the idea that if we can get some really in-depth data about what's been used to resolve cases and plot it against the case types that we're generating, um, like it would be really cool to see that on a big scale, to see if we can start to point guidance towards effective types of interventions for effective things. Now, I'm not saying this is a one size fits all because every single case is unique, but on a large enough scale, there are trends. And maybe if we find that there are trends in some types of cases, or if we've got our data recording nuanced enough, we can highlight that there's an anomaly that says, oh, for most cases do start with X, but for cases where Y happens, go with Y. I think that's really cool. Like I would love to be able to dig into some of that, like those links of we tried these things, this was the thing that was successful. This is a plug. Our system can help you with that. There you go. I've done my plug. But I presume most other systems can as well. That's not like it's a hard thing to consider. So that's the crux of things that I, as a massive data nerd, am massively interested in discussing with everybody. Additionally, as a part of this wider discussion, what would actually be useful on a national level to actually record, and what could we get back from that recorded data? It'd be all well and good for us to submit, thousands of pages of data that's really, really nuanced on a national level, but if we cloud things too much, or if we cover things up by creating too much noise, like to what extent is it going to be useful, and how will we be able to use layers of data as it's kind of provided, if that makes sense? Because obviously there are great advantages if nationally you can identify trends. It means that you don't just leave housing associations and councils trying to implement similar policies ad hoc. You can actually start to get things like national campaigns together, or put together. It's again, it's that benefit of economy of scale. If everybody knows that there would be a great value in producing a service that does this, maybe there's scope for that service to be something that's outside of any one housing association. All of that sort of really good stuff. These are things that I'm really interested in as to things that we could do with data, and to that end, what data gives us that, and can we do that with the information that we've currently got? Spoilers from the first few slides, I don't think so. Yeah, that's kind of my position, and those are the things I'd love to talk about. Obviously, it's not all about me, sadly, and so I'm also happy to answer any and all questions that may or may not be relevant. I'm now going to see if I can figure out how to get myself off from sharing the screen.
Thanks, Graham. While you figure that out, and I think you just need to click stop sharing.
There it is. Yeah, it's there.
Have you got
Oh,
it? No, you
that's brought
can
up a
just read it.
different button.
You do that while I just have a look, quite a look at chat. I can see your hand up, Brian, as well, so it'd be great to get your views on this. I think Rachel has said within the chat, I think ASB categories would have to be standardised across the board first before national data can be considered. And I think that's really important, actually, in terms of what it is we're looking at, how we can trust the data, and how we can do something with it. I will come on to that in a minute. I do want to bring Brian in, but Graham, I can see that you're still looking at how you stop sharing
Yeah,
your screen.
I
If
can
you
share my screen. I can't unshare it for some reason.
Let me just see
I've
whether
got a button that says
I
share and it's
I can
green.
do it for you. There you go. Who knew that I had
Thank
all
you.
the power? Ooh, that'll go to my head. Right, Brian, do you want to come in? Please take yourself off mute, pop your hand down, and ask Graham anything.
Case Management Solution Group, or CMSG, are the home of React, the UK's #1 case management system for ASB and community safety. We are delighted to have them as one of our key sponsors for Social Housing Roundtable 2025 into 2026. And with the ASB app now fully integrated to the platform, it allows residents to record, monitor and report issues directly to their case office in live time. What's not to love? CMSG are bringing simplicity back to case management, and I cannot recommend them enough and thank them for all of their support through this period and through the rest of the year. Thank you, CMSG, and do please go check them out on social media and on LinkedIn. Thank you.
Uh, I think one of the issues, and you raised it earlier on, Graham, was the fact that you've got housing associations, you've got councils, you've got maybe, as in our case here in Almo, you've got the police, you've got the fire brigade, you've got all these organisations, but there's no standard in what's recorded, and there's no standard in what is shared. You may have a situation on a Saturday night. You end up with 2 police cars outside the house because there's a major incident going on, and the housing provider may not know that for 3 or 4 weeks. If they know it at all, it will only be if somebody locally actually gets in touch with the housing provider and say, I'm sick and tired of this happening every Saturday night. And then the housing provider will find out maybe from the police what's going on. And I think the only way you're going to get it is standardizing the information, but also standardizing what's shared.
Yeah.
I've come across situations where, you've had people arrested and the housing provider's known nothing about it. And how the property's empty maybe for 3 or 4 weeks before they find out. And I think putting that standard together would be something that may well help in putting together data that can be then used nationally. But locally, to start off with, you've got all the housing providers, the council, the police, the fire brigade, maybe the ambulance service, and standardizing what's recorded. And as would happen, we say with something like domestic abuse. You may have an ambulance in there, but you may not have the police knowing anything about it. And it's getting all that together.
Additionally, on that thought as well, if we are standardizing that sort of thing, having that level of standardization of what's shared can go like that. Like the standardization, the categorization will make it easier to share left and right to other organizations as well as up to a larger thing. So there's a great benefit to being able to standardize that sort of information. I mean, it is worth noting there is a process in place. Obviously, there's the ASB case review that kind of brings people together, but that is very much after things have been going on for a while as opposed to earlier on in the process. But you're exactly right. Standardization has lots of benefits.
It happened during COVID. The amount of information that was shared during COVID in relation to vulnerabilities between councils, doctor surgeries, NHS, and everything else.
Yeah.
When COVID stopped, the sharing stopped.
And I think we know it makes sense, don't we? And we've seen it, within like a complaints example, we've got a standardized way of monitoring and kind of a process that the Ombudsman has now put in place. And actually what we've seen is, yes, complaint volumes have gone up, but actually resolutions, there's a little more transparency around kind of actually what happens when somebody escalates a complaint. We just don't have that government guidance from an ASB perspective. And some should argue potentially, should we wait for government, and whose responsibility might it be to take some of that data and get it standardized? Because we do have high level standard data from there's some ASB stats within kind of your tenant satisfaction measures in England, and some of the kind of regulatory linked to regulation, I guess, from Housemark that do some high level antisocial behaviour information as well. But again, that is something you have to kind of subscribe to voluntarily rather than being told to do. But it does certainly create that kind of case for standard, because it allows you all to see what good looks like, in the nicest way. Where are the hotspots? What happens? I completely value kind of your input there, Brian, and kind of support what you're saying. And I think Graham's on the same page as well. Got a couple more hands up, a couple more comments within the chat. I will very quickly just look to the chat, and then I'll bring you in, Alicia. Just Lindsay saying they may not share information even when you request it because of the enforcement teams attending a perpetrator's property for an incident at ASB, but they might fail to inform the housing association about that visit. And again, I think, we don't necessarily have full multi-agency joined up in the same way that potentially social workers and things like that do, from a housing perspective, which I think is very interesting. Alicia, you've got your hand up. Please feel free to come in.
Yeah, I have just to say hello to Lindsay. She and I spend an awful lot of time talking about this. And Graham, welcome to a fellow nerd. This is one of those instances where the statistics and the data could be doing so much for us. For a beginning, as I mentioned in the chat, they would help us tenants to actually have something to use to lobby for change. I've just come off another meeting. I'm involved in a regional scrutiny group with 5 housing associations. We've just done scrutiny on ASB, and actually all of our housing associations are doing everything that they are supposed to be. So the question that we're now going back to them with is, well, why is it that there is more ASB? And it's not just a perception, and it's not just relevant to social housing, but more of us are having our lives blighted, and we are talking about having our lives blighted by ASB. I had the police out 2 days after Christmas. It's a regular thing for me, having to listen to someone else's door being broken down because of drugs and firearms. So, and as I say, my housing association are doing everything they have to be, but the problem is we don't have that joined up approach. We don't have those set of statistics that we can use to actually know. I'm just the same. When I first got involved with the ASB type thing, side of things, I looked for the statistics, and apart from the usual, well, so and so percent of people have complained, so and so percent say it's no point because no one does anything about it. And I just wish that we could have, just to begin with, that one set of data, or perhaps your company is the one that's going to come and give it to us, that one set of data for us to have a starting point where we can begin. And it is that we are missing. We have got plenty. We have regularly in TSM's perception regarding ASB is that it's a major problem. It's one of the things which virtually every landlord would appear to be failing. As I say, we have just found out that our landlords aren't failing to do what they should be doing, but there is more ASB. And I think we do need to start. It's okay, I can go round and round the houses talking forever about my personal circumstances, as can Lindsay, but we need those statistics so that we can actually hold people to account.
Yeah.
Alicia, I think really, really good. Graham, do you want to come in?
So I have some, I mean, I agree 100%. Yeah. Having some sort of statistics or some sort of oversight on anything, it can only be helpful. So yeah, no, I 100% agree there. There's also, this has triggered another one of my little interests that I have, which is kind of like the workflow and how we handle ASB. And you've said a couple of times the phrase, it was our housing association is doing everything they should do, if that makes sense. And there is always that, is it everything you should do? Is it everything you could do? And that's not to be unfair on the other side, because I am also aware that time is a resource and it's stretched as far as it can be. This kind of loops back into the getting the most out of what you've got and kind of like effective deployment and being able to analyze that data. Another thing that I try to do when I'm working with kind of like customers onboarding and stuff like that is try to have to build up that data profile of decision points and why and things like that is in the workflows, have the points where you're making decisions and having a moment to justify why you're doing something one way or the other, so as that if there is a review later, you can see, well, at the time with the information we had, we did it this way. And because that sort of thing can generate really cool learning points. And again, that kind of comes back into my discussion of it would be really cool to know that there's a process where not only are we generating data, but we are doing something with it afterwards and actually properly reflecting on and building on that information.
Thanks, Graham. Thanks, Alicia. I think, Alicia, your point really summarised kind of, we can't, our landlords are doing everything they should be doing. This is the deal within the contract, of your tenancy agreement, so to speak, and they're meeting that and they're telling us about it and they're recording it. But we know that there are pressures within the community, new different forms of antisocial behaviour that come in lots of different ways now. We've seen, social media change the game a little bit as well, where people have moved kind of, disagreements, arguments, and things like that on from real life into kind of online. And I think, it's important that landlords can keep up with and make sure their policies and procedures reflect how antisocial behaviour changes. But I think what's really interesting, to your point, Graham, is if we are capturing the right data, doing something with it, standardizing it in a way that allows us to spot trend, surely we should move from prevention to resolution to prevention, really addressing kind of the cause, or understanding a little bit about where those hotspots might exist. And I think we can only do that smartly with kind of prioritized data. I'm just going to jump to the chat very quickly, and then I've got a couple of people with their hands up waiting very patiently. Lindsay's put some great information in there about, information is obviously accessible to some, as in kind of utility companies who attend perpetrators' properties with a number of vehicles and dogs to change a meter. This occurred shortly after the perpetrator moved in. A utilities company is aware of perpetrator's history of behaviour, but why aren't agencies kind of not working together better? And I guess to your point, Graham, it might come down to kind of resource. But Alicia, you're spot on. We need to know that victims are being taken seriously and there is accountability. I think what we're hearing is that does exist in pockets, but actually needing to kind of create perhaps more transparency and trust between those processes wouldn't go amiss. We need to monitor the behaviour and assess whether complaints are resolved or remaining outstanding. And I think resolution is really important, but also having that data and spotting trend, Lindsay, I think is again really important to make sure that it's not just a recurring issue. And where we do have recurring issues, do we need to do something differently? Thank you so much, Barbara, for being patient. Do feel free to come in, and then I'll go to Rachel. If you just pop yourself off mute.
Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Can you just give me 10 seconds? My doorbell's been ringing. I'm trying
Tell
to
you what,
write
I'll get to Rachel and then I'll come back to you,
Okay,
Barbara.
thank you so much.
No
I'll be back in a more. Can you mute me, Elaine?
I will mute you, yeah. I hope it's good. I hope you've got a good prezi. Rachel, feel free to come off mute and jump in. And hopefully your door's not going as well.
No, it's not. Don't worry, I've got a partner who can answer if it does. I just wanted to say, I'm an antisocial behaviour legal officer, so I've been in the sector for 10 years. There is many challenges on the sector, and the sector has got much harder to work in than when I first started. You've got obviously a housing crisis, but then you've also got properties that you can't let out. You've got you need to put money into properties, but we haven't got the money to put into them. So then sometimes you get those people who maybe don't fit the demographic you maybe want. You have the underfunding of over 55 services that then become into general needs. So then that obviously creates a clash of lifestyles between the two. And I think, it is very, very difficult. I used to work as a generalist, so doing ASB plus everything else. And, there is a side, you have to get the lettings right, but you never know what's going to happen when you let a property out. So you can do all your checks, you can do absolutely everything, but you do not know what's going to happen behind that door. And one of the hardest things is keeping victims on side when you're building a case to go to court, because the court system in this country and the way ASB is geared is that it takes such a long time. I've got 7 possession cases at the moment, but that's taking me such a long time to actually get them to court, and we've got no guarantee. And I know that for obviously the victims of ASB, they feel like, you're not doing anything, or nothing's happening here. And we are, but we have to go through the court process. And I think the government have got a lot to answer for by sort of saying 3 strikes and you're out. I sometimes say if I had a magic wand, we'd have much more power. But obviously landlords, we're going to have closure orders soon when the new Crime Policeman Act comes in. So I think there will be newer things that come up, but it is a difficult one. And sometimes you do just have areas where no matter what you try, you put money in, you put investment, you try and get the lettings right. For whatever reason, you end up with pockets of communities where ASB, it's just an ASB hotspot, unfortunately. But no, definitely it's hard keeping victims on side. But one thing I always guarantee my victims is I do take it seriously and I'll try my very best.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. I think it's really good to hear your perspective on the ground, and certainly I think anecdotally I speak to lots of people from the sector, still working in the sector, still working in the sector myself. It is harder to work in the sector, and I think we probably haven't got even time to touch upon the talent, the skills, the retention. How do we keep people like you motivated who actually genuinely care versus because it's difficult out there, but at the same time, how do we follow those right procedures, like you say, keep victims informed, but on side, because actually it's all of their, and I think Alicia touched upon this, it's all of their world if they're in that position, and that's all they feel every day. And actually landlords have such a unique position because we have got this opportunity to kind of offer support, but it's our role really to make sure that residents feel safe within their properties. And we talk about quality homes, we talk about bricks and mortar, but it's also about how they feel within their community. So thank you so much for that perspective. I really value it. Graham, is there anything you want to come in? Barbara's back from her door, and we've got Lindsay with her hand up as well.
Alert Call return as one of the keynote sponsors for the Social Housing Roundtable in 2025 into 2026, and we're delighted to have them back. Alert Call help as many people as possible feel safe, connected and informed by combining ingenious technology and award-winning human contact. As you can see from this touchscreen I've got with me, Alert Call's digital engagement solution helps social landlords proactively know their customers and properties by putting a portable touchscreen in every home, offering a daily property check through the optional OK Each Day service, plus repairs reporting, tenant surveys and much more. They also provide Beyond Warden Call, an easier, simpler and lower cost wireless warden call solution with video door entry, dispersed telecare and smoke alarms. Alert Call work with over 60 housing providers across the UK to enhance two-way engagement between customers and their landlords. In 2022, Alert Call won the Queen's Award for Enterprise and Innovation, and in 2023, Alert Call won Housing Supplier of the Year. We're delighted to have them back with us throughout the course of this year, and please do go check them out on social media and LinkedIn to find out more. Thank you very much, Alert Call, for sponsoring us again.
So is there anything you want to just add before I go?
Very quickly on that side of like yeah, no, I appreciate that it's that some ASB cases are just hard and require a lot of time and effort. And basically some of the things that I'm mentioning about like being able to guidance this, guidance that, and stuff like that. Basically, the hope is that maybe if we can gather enough data around these sorts of hotspots, we can actually find a trend that, like, because obviously there's your view of it where you're inside it and dealing with it and very much dealing with the people, but perhaps being able to get a higher level view over it all and being able to pick data trends out of multiple case officers, maybe that's something that will actually provide a different solution, or something can be highlighted and then an approach to a hotspot can be made that isn't on the back of just one caseworker to figure out, but instead be on the back of a much more joined up approach, which is quite a common theme. So yeah,
Thanks,
that's
Graham.
that. Yeah.
No, I think you make a really important case about seeing that kind of bigger picture, but I think it's really difficult when you've got those kind of operational challenges right in front of you to take that time out and think, I need to look at the trend, I need to do this, I need to create a business case for more resources.
Yeah.
It is that kind of everyday balance. Barbara, come on in.
Thank you. Good morning. Happy New Year, everyone.
You too.
I missed that little bit and it was so interesting, but I believe it's recorded anyway. I can watch it back, can't I? People are saying, or the previous speakers, exactly what I had written down, but I like between Graham and Alicia, when it was said that landlords are not failing what they should be doing, and Graham said, but what they could be doing. I sit on a scrutiny group at a housing association, and we've just done antisocial behaviour, and that's what we found, what they could be doing. And the biggest thing that we found between a housing officer, the multidisciplinary teams, was communication. People were, oh, I'll just phone Barbara next week. It's on their record. and something happens, because they are caught up in an awful lot of procedures. Barbara doesn't get her call, but she's suffering mental health problems. Sometimes I have said to housing officers, stop emailing. Email's a good way of paper trail for both parties, all parties, but pick up the phone as well as email. And I agree right at the beginning with Brian, it should be standardised, all of this, because the dots aren't being joined up. They really, really aren't. And nobody's going to get anywhere. Nobody. Nobody's going to be, what's the word? When it's really good. Oh, crikey, I forgot my words. I must have been drunk at Christmas.
Right. You weren't alone.
Yeah. What I would like to say is what I found is housing associations tend to be reactive rather than proactive, and I don't like that, because there are communities which are okay, and there's an influx of tenants in and out of the houses. I totally blame choice-based lettings, totally, and also a little bit the lettings teams of housing associations, because people are not vetted as they should be. So communities where they used to be 20 years ago, picked out, they're not now because of the way we all live. But by being reactive and not proactive, we're not getting the handheld approach that we used to. And that's why Alicia was ringing the police, because she's got problems next door. I've rung the police because I have, and nobody's talking to each other.
Yeah.
This has got to be changed. You will only change the way, and I'm sorry about this, Graham, if you go back to the beginning and build on it, join the dots up. Any
Yep.
other way won't. And I get sick and tired of actually expressing this. And I get tired because nobody listens to me.
Yeah, and I think
Yes.
that's a
And I
real.
am, and I am Live West, Victoria. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Okay,
Thanks for coming in. No, that's fine. Thank you. I'll bring you in a minute, Lindsay. I think Graham, just what was interesting. I think Barbara supporting a lot of what we've said today. But actually, what was interesting is Barbara talking about kind of allocations, lettings, choice. How we're creating communities in the first place. And I guess that's a bit of a dilemma, because social housing is absolutely there for the people who need it most, and we want to be able to balance all of these kind of needs of kind of communities. We've got homelessness, all of that sort of thing. We're the agency for kind of giving people those chances, but also we recognise we've got existing tenants, really well behaved tenants, good bill paying tenants, and there's a responsibility there. Do you, I don't know whether in your experience or anybody else within the chat, because I can see kind of lots of people talking in the chat as well. Is it about kind of that balanced communities and starting again? What Barbara said. What do you have an experience of that? I know you might not.
I have a tangentially related thought, I suppose, which kind of comes down to there's I'm trying to think about the right way to kind of like phrase it. It is very tangential to this, because this is something that is absolutely outside of my wheelhouse of expertise, if that makes sense. So I don't have a huge amount of it. One of the things in the ASB procedure that I find quite interesting, and one of the things that is an interesting discussion point with the people that with our customers and stuff like that, is it's that whole symptom versus cause type thing, which again is a very common thought on this as well. And so having better data lets us join up dots, lets us look for symptoms. One of the other things as well that's just of interest is in the procedures, I'm the big advocate for when you've got these ASB cases that come through, taking a moment to kind of risk assess the perpetrator as well, to try and separate out sometimes, and this isn't me like excusing or anything else like that, sometimes there'll be cases where the ASB is a symptom of a different problem, and trying to treat ASB is never going to work because you're not treating the actual cause behind it. And so having a more joined up approach and having more information from other organizations to get a better picture of what's going on inside a community could only be of use.
And I think that that's triangulation in terms of getting that kind of 360 view, absolutely, would help us understand a little bit more about perhaps some of those causes or triggers. Lindsay, thank you. You've waited patiently, and I'm pleased you found the hands up button.
Hi,
I would have brought you in.
Sorry, good morning, everyone, and nice to meet you too, Alicia, at last. The thing I would say is not all housing associations deal with ASB in an appropriate way, and victims are not taken seriously. So when you do find a housing association where there are failings, sorry, I'm now suffering brain fog. Basically, you know, it's a real problem when you're not taken seriously, when you're not risk assessed. In that situation, that's where I think we need a centralised system, because how many people, how many victims are being dealt with in the same way like me and my family? And I just think it's just a real concern, because I've come across many people, you know, during this sort of fight to get a resolution. I'm coming across this all the time. We need to know that we are taken seriously. We need a resolution. We need to know that these HAs, these local authorities, are held to account and that they're doing the right thing. We do not need to be bullied further and feel, you know, even more backed into a corner when we're in desperate need of support. And I'm finding this far too often. And I think, thankfully, in Alicia's case, she seems to have a really good HA and is able to work together to find a resolution. There's a lot of good people in the world of ASB. We just need it all to be joined up, and we need this centralised system going forward, because victims have failed and all the support is afforded to the perpetrator, and I just think it's fundamentally wrong.
Thank you, Lindsay. I think what you raised there is really interesting point, actually, in terms of that centralised system, the support that you'd want and see, but also what you said was, you know, are they doing the right thing? And I think we could spend another hour talking about what the right thing is. And I think that's potentially where some standardisation comes in. Again, where the kind of topic of this roundtable came from, you know, how much data is out there that we can trust, because actually, you know, it's brilliant that we're a sector that shares a lot of our data, and certainly organisations that deliver that benchmark is a good thing. But at the same time, I think we're in a position where, you know, if we're not comparing apples with apples, if we can't go into dig under that kind of headline figure and really understand actually what does good look like. And I don't think bad is volume. I think, like Rachel said, you know, it's harder out there. We can't judge kind of more ASB cases as a bad thing for landlords at the moment. I think what we need to be looking at is, what does success look like within kind of you know, ASB, and ultimately it's tenants feeling kind of safe, protected, and kind of supported when things go wrong. I'm going to go to the chat. I'm conscious that we've only got a few minutes left, Graham. I'll come back to you to do a bit of a summary, but I just want to catch up with what people are saying here. And you know, Alicia saying perhaps we need a tenant group to lobby for change. And I think it is really important that we continue to hear both sides of the kind of tenant story, you know, and we've heard that today. It's been really fantastic to hear that you know, Barbara is getting things, her organisations are getting things right. Alicia, you know, the landlords aren't failing, but actually what you're asking is, you know, that balance between could and should, and what does that look like going forward. Cameron's reached out for some support from Rachel, and certainly thinking about things like, what would you be interested, would you be all right if you were contacted in, to be, because they're interested in housing enforcement processes and high level housing. And I guess that comes back to, again, things like generalist housing versus kind of specialist housing officers that deal with are trained to deal with kind of ASB. Lindsay again said there should be people vetted when it comes to rehousing. I think that's a really interesting topic, and one that can be explored, because housing associations are there to kind of support, and councils are there to kind of support people, and give people chances. And like Rachel says, you don't know what happens. You never know what kind of it is going to happen when somebody's given a home, regardless of kind of how well you think they'll fit. We've got, problem is that they're not allowed to take into consideration all of the information, so the information is not shared. Alicia's praising her estates officers that used to be in housing when the council was there. Really important that we see both sides of the story, like we said. And I think, understanding that once somebody commits ASB, we're able to see whether they're moved on from a housing association for the same thing. I guess you want, everybody needs an opportunity to kind of get housing and get that support, but at the same time, it's that balance between protecting those people already in the community. Louisa said she works for a council ASB team, and we get the same feedback that from our complainants, that they're having to duplicate calls to us and the police as no information is shared. We are based in a local police station. The way police record ASB is very different as well, and many councils can only deal with different types of specific ASB. And I think that kind of plays to your point, Graham, a little bit about that standardisation. And I think Lindsay's just supporting the kind of tenants group. So we're caught up on the chat, which is fantastic. Tim, nearly caught up, and then you're all waiting for me to kind of take a breath. Really useful information there from Tim. Single national information sharing agreement, crime and policing bill, and immediate justice pilots. Again, useful kind of to follow up and continue that conversation. And I always encourage you guys, an hour goes so quickly when we talk about this, and we can't constantly just talk about the same thing, but do continue the conversation outside of our community. And if you do need to kind of share information, do reach out and let me know, and I'll happily do that. Graham, I'll take a breath. We've got 4 minutes left. What have I heard? I have heard about transparency, standardization, communication, triangulation of data, a triage, a treatment, and then the tactics to kind of not only deal with the here and now, but also that prevention. But it's easier said than done. And kind of Rachel reminded us that it's harder than ever to work in housing at the moment.
Yeah.
Antisocial behaviour is changing, and there's more of it potentially out there for whatever reason. It is affecting communities. It is raising questions about allocations and lettings and vetting and all of those things that actually can feel a little bit scary at times. So, how do we summarize all of that in a sector that also is suffering from multiple plates spinning, not just antisocial behaviour, and challenges on real resources as well, because we're not necessarily being funded in the same way that we were kind of 20 years ago when I first entered the sector. So final thoughts, Graham, deep breath.
So exactly as you've said, there is a great desire from everyone to get that level of standardization, particularly based on what Tim's put in there. Yeah, the second one is that the goal behind this as well is not punitive. This isn't we can standardize and get, and I think everybody has said this, that they want it to be something that is supportive, something that helps you build and be more and let you get the most out of what you have available to have maximum impact and into resolving things. I find very, very fascinating, and I agree absolutely with the bit in brackets about policing where data, if captured correctly, says they're needed, because there is an interesting thing of you will get what you look for, if that makes sense, or data can only report what you've recorded type thing, or what you allow it to record, which is always something to bear in mind when you're designing these sorts of things. You want to be able to gather data and then interpret it. If you set up your system to gather interpreted data, you'll only ever find what the system was designed to catch, which also comes down to if you send loads of patrols into an area, you'll find lots of stuff, and if you keep patrolling that area, you won't find stuff otherwhere because the resource has gone. That's not to say that there aren't hotspots that need extra patrols, but chicken, egg, correct data management, there's a lot of real fundamentals of data processing, everything else like that I really enjoy, and it's just my sincere hope that as we build this standardized model and as we build this a better network, and with a desire like this that is very clear and present with all actors across all of the areas. It's not like there's a holdout saying, oh no, we don't really want to share this data or anything else like that. Everyone agrees it's a good idea, and so I would be hopeful that it will happen, because that's certainly my hope is that that's the way that works. So the setup and what we draw from that and how we interpret that, and like being mindful of good data practice, is going to play a key part on this.
Thanks, Graham. I think, bringing us back to kind of data, I think is really important, and what we can do if we understand it a little bit more. Thank you. Thank you for your contributors today. Thank you for joining. Thank you for listening. If you are around next week at 11 o'clock, we are joined by Jan and Chloe, who'll be talking about person-centered approach to fire safety. So things are changing in that regulatory space, and we want to just really talk about how we continue to protect our residents and tenants next week. So join me then, and thank you very much for contributing today, everybody. Take care.